Here are 10 chord progressions that I love that I think you as a music maker should know. Progression number 1 is melancholic yet hopeful. So in the scale of F major, let's go from D to C to A sharp. Let's then add their fifths as well as their thirds. And to transition back to our D minor chord, the 6th, it's kind of cool to add a 5 chord at the end as a passing chord, which is a C major in this case. Now to spice up the pattern, let's add a C as a pedal point throughout. Let's then add a G to our 3rd chord. And add a 7th to our A sharp major chord. And these tweaks make our overall progression sound more playful and jazzy. Especially with some more production elements.
Nobody's ever gonna take your place. Yeah, I think we should meet in the middle. I'll follow you 'cause you're the light of the day. I need you like you need me, it's so simple.
So progression number 2 has quite a bold emotion. So let's turn to the C major scale and start with the bass notes D, A, C, and G. Then let's add their fifths, their thirds, and let's copy paste the bass notes to a higher octave to make the chords sound fuller. So this is the 2-6-1-5 progression, and you may recognize it from songs like Blinding Lights, Greyhound, Sunshine, and even Time by Hans Zimmer. But it's definitely possible to create our own version of this. Let's add the 5th note of the scale, in this case G, on top of every chord to create an emotional sense of stability. Let's then add a 5th to both the 6 and the 5 chords and create a more energetic rhythm. Now, when we add a drum loop and a vocal, we get this. So next up is a progression that is literally a roller coaster of emotions. So in the C major scale, let's go from C to E to F and stay on F for another bar. And as always, let's add the fifths and thirds, but we're going to deviate from the C major scale and change 2 things here. We're turning our E minor chord into an E major chord, and we're turning our 2nd F major chord into an F minor chord. So we're basically borrowing chords from different scales to add some elements of surprise. And what we can do to make this pattern sound even better is adding some sustained notes on top, while also adding an E every half bar, resolving to an F in the final bar. You may, by the way, recognize this chord progression from Radiohead's Creep and Olivia Rodrigo's Vampire, and it works really well for ballads. Okay, so for the next one, let's stay in C major, and let's start with throwing the notes C and G 4 times. Now, these notes sound good with a lot of different chords, but I especially love them on a 4-5-6-5 progression, which is uplifting though slightly emotional. So let's draw F, G, A, and G as the bass notes. Add our fifths, add our thirds. And this may remind you of something just like this by the Chainsmokers and Coldplay or other songs, because these chords are very, very popular. So let's try making them more unique by adding a passing chord at the end, which could be a C major chord. And then we could actually chop this up into a cool arpeggiating guitar riff just to make it a little more unique. By the way, if you enjoy videos like these, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. Okay, so let's use a guitar once again, but this time for some introspective indie chords. In the scale of E major, let's go from B to F sharp to A to E. Let's add some fifths, some thirds, and another layer of the bass notes, but higher. Okay, so now let's actually make it special and indie. In our B major chord, let's add a fourth or 11th, which is this E. In our F sharp minor chord, let's add a 7th, a 9th, and an 11th to make it a minor 11th chord. Then in our A major chord, let's add a 2nd or a 9th, another 5th, and a 7th. And finally, in our E major chord, our home chord, let's add another 5th and a 2nd or 9th. So essentially we now created this progression, and it goes like this. And with some drums, some atmosphere sounds, and a bass, it sounds like this. Lovely. Now, not every chord needs a third or crazy extension, so let's now only use bass notes and fifths to create this very bold and epic feel. Let's start with an ambient sample to set the mood. And then we want to draw an A, a C, and an F. And we'll copy and paste those so we can make a variation where we add the notes D, C, and D again. And now all we have to do is copy and paste the bass notes and drag them to their respective fifths. Epic. Okay, the next progression works really well for pre-choruses, and this time we'll be using some inversions of chords. So in the scale of D sharp major, let's get down to 4, the 1, and the 5 chords for the first half of the progression. And for the second half, let's do the 1, the 3, and the 4 chords. So our second chord is the 1, which is our home chord, and to make it more suspenseful, let's invert the chord by changing its bass note to the 3rd rather than using the 1st, which is this G. And in the second half, let's do something similar. Let's turn this G, which is the bass note of the 3 chord, into a D, which is actually the perfect 5th within that same chord. And again, that adds some more tension. So here's what our progression sounds like now. And that really reminds me of a pre-chorus Avicii would have used. So I created a little verse and pre to demonstrate what this pattern could sound like as a pre-chorus. So let's stay on the piano to create a progression with a magical feel. In the C major scale, let's draw the 1 chord, C major. Then let's go to the 5, G major. Next we want to go to the 2 chord, which is D, but instead of it being minor, let's make it major. And let's add this 4th or 11th on top for some extra suspense. So now we have this. And you can just feel that 3rd chord needs to be resolved. So let's add the 4 chord, F major, as the final chord, while again adding that G on top for more stability across the chords. Feels kind of magical, right? This is the progression that Coldplay used in their song Amsterdam, which I love. And alternatively, we could also move the first 2 chords to the back of the progression, which makes for a very cool variation. Okay, next up is a progression that is a little more soulful and romantic. So in C major, let's draw a 2 chord, D minor, with a 7th on top. From there, let's go to the 5 chord, G major, and again with a 7th. But let's put the G and the B an octave higher so the gap between the chords is smaller. Then we go to the home chord, the 1, which is C major, but again with a 7th on top. And finally, we're going to resolve to the 6th chord, A minor, and you guessed it, we're again adding a 7th on top. And we're also moving up the A by an octave for less of a gap between this chord and the previous one. And then we get the following quite famous chord pattern. But the beauty of this is its potential for variations. We could, for example, turn the final chord into an A major chord for a surprising twist. And for example, add a passing chord to get to the final chord, which could, for instance, be this E minor 7th in the 3rd bar. And here's what that same progression sounds like if we add some more rhythm and production.
Postman, can you give me what I need? I'm looking for a tall man who can lift me on my feet, who can take me higher, show me things I've never seen. Hey, Mr. Postman, can you give me what I need?
Nice. Okay, so for the 10th and final progression, let's make something badass. So in the scale of G major, or E minor if you will, let's go from E to D to C sharp, which is a borrowed chord. Like usually this scale would have an A minor chord as the 2 chord, but we're instead borrowing the A major chord and taking its first inversion consisting of C sharp, E, and A. And finally, we're resolving to C. And instead of building full chords around this, I'll only add their relevant thirds, G, F sharp, E, and E. And this progression feels kind of badass, kind of bold, and reminds me of songs like Addicted to You by Avicii or Summer Days by Martin Garrix. So if we substitute our piano from earlier with something more aggressive and add some matching production elements, we're definitely able to capture more of that audacious feel. Okay, so these were some of my favorite chord progressions out there. We've covered most of the basic chords as well as stuff like inversions, extensions, pedal points, borrowed chords, passing chords, you name it. So I'd encourage you to play with these progressions yourself and let me know about your favorite chord progressions in the comments below. And with that said, I'd like to thank you for watching and I'll see you next week.